So it is my great pleasure to welcome the award-winning and million-selling author. It's true, it's on your website, so unless you're telling fibs, it's absolutely true. Kate Ellis. Kate is the author of a couple of series of crime novels and other bits and pieces as well, which have, yes, totaled over 1 million sales now, which is a remarkable feat, isn't it? Kate, welcome to the Literary Festival. It's lovely to have you here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to do a bit for Devon Libraries.
Thank you.
Very close to my heart.
Well, it is a great pleasure to have you here. And I think we should start first off probably by just telling everybody a little bit about your background. How came you to be in this position writing these books? What led you into this particular area?
Well, I've always loved crime. From the first time I went to the library, it was always a sort of Enid Blyton mystery story I would get out. I've always loved libraries. In fact, I've got a scar to prove it. When I was about 5, I was coming back from our local library and I fell over. So I have my library scar.
I was going to say we don't generally scar people coming into the library. It's not something we offer as a service, but it's good to know that you picked it up thanks to going to the library. I did, yeah.
So proud of my library scar. But I've always loved mysteries. My mum was an avid mystery reader, and she led me into a life of crime. As I say, I loved Enid Blyton, Fatty and the Five Findouters. Oh, wonderful mystery stories. I preferred the mysteries to the adventures, I think. And then, of course, when I was old enough, my mum gave me all the Agatha Christie's to read, the Golden Age. So I just became completely addicted. But I went on to study drama in Manchester. And the first thing I wrote sort of professionally, properly, was a play. And it was called Clearing Out. It was about these 2 old ladies clearing out a house. It was something that, it was inspired by something that happened in Liverpool to my family. And my mum was helping her cousin clear out my aunt's house. All sorts of people came out of the woodwork. This builder who was an aunt's boyfriend, and he kept systematically stripping the place. So anyway, I wrote this play, and it won a competition, the Northwest Playwrights competition. And that really got me started. It was performed professionally, and it's performed by professional actors, professional director. And I learned so much about plotting, pacing, characterization from that experience, that even though I didn't go on to write plays, I used all that knowledge when I came to novels. I'd written, being addicted to crime novels, I'd written a novel when I was at university, a crime novel, but it never saw the light of day, and I have no idea what happened to it. But even so, I really enjoyed the experience. So when it came to writing, I knew what I wanted to write.
And here you are many books later, and just for the benefit of anyone who might not be familiar with the range of your work, just summarize briefly your different series of books and the premise behind them for us.
Oh, right. Well, I've got the Wesley Peterson series. That's my main series. I've written 24 books in the Wesley Peterson series, and I just can't believe it. I never thought when I wrote the first one that it would go on for so long, but I keep getting different ideas. It's about a black archaeology graduate who joins, is a detective inspector down in the fictional port of Tradworth in South Devon. And he is ably assisted, or he ably assists his DCI, who's called Jerry Heffernan. And Jerry is a sort of complete, Wesley's an intellectual. He's from a medical family, he's highly intelligent. His parents came over from Trinidad to train as doctors, and his sister's a doctor. But he's the odd one out because he loved archaeology and antiquities and the past, you know. So anyway, Jerry is ex-merchant navy, rough and ready, DCI. He's from Liverpool like me, and when I was growing up I met a lot of Jerrys. You know, he's based on the sort of amalgam of characters I met, uncles, you know, characters I met when I was growing up. And Neil's best friend from university, he studied archaeology at Exeter. Neil's best friend from university is Neil Watson, and he's Dr. Watson. Every detective should have one.
Yes.
And he's works for the County Archaeological Unit, Devon, you know, South Devon County Archaeological Unit.
We're here in
archaeology and the history.
Yes, and we're here in Devon, of course, as well. So why did you choose to set them in Devon? You're not Devon resident yourself, but you chose to set this particular series in Devon. What made you choose this county as a location?
Well, somebody once told me that if you want to have a setting for your books, choose somewhere that you'd like to visit, and you'd like to visit time and time again to do research. So I took that on board, really. I first came to South Devon. Oh, my eldest son was 6 months old, and we were absolutely broke and we couldn't afford a holiday. And a friend took pity on us. His parents had a timeshare in Torquay. And he said, why don't you come down with us? So we went down. We were very, very grateful. And he said one day, I'm going to take you somewhere very special. So we got on the bus, the train, the steam train at Paynton, and went to Kingswear, and then across on the ferry to Dartmouth. And I just fell in love with Dartmouth. And, you know, I thought when it came time for me to start writing a series, this is where I want to set it. And of course, Devon's got a wonderful history, great maritime history. And, you know, for lots of communities as well, the farming community, the incomers, rich people, second homeowners, tourists, you know, vast amount of tourists, and sort of quirky things like my town of Neston is, I hope no one from Totnes is watching. My town of Neston is based on the rather new age town of Totnes. So I have that, all the new age people, and you know, there's such a great variety which you might not get in a big city. And I didn't really want to write about a big city either. I mean, I'm from Liverpool, and went to University of Manchester, and now I live in a little town south of Manchester. But I didn't want to write about a big city because I think publishers have expectations. If you're writing about a big city, it's going to be all about drugs, prostitution. Now, I wanted to write a different. I was watching Victoria's talk earlier, and I'm very inspired by the Golden Age, and I wanted to write about more. Not necessarily rural, but small town, you know, all sorts of different characters, you know, and that appealed to me more than writing the urban, gritty. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? The kind of small town characters give you probably more scope in many ways than large ones. I mean, in the crime panel this morning, Trevor Wood was talking about the fact that he comes from Newcastle upon Tyne, and how, you know, Newcastle is quite a small place and lots of people know lots of other people. So therefore it could be tricky to get away with crime in some respects. But I was making the point that, of course, you know, he was saying, well, Newcastle is just 4 miles from one side to the other. And I said, well, yeah, that's fair enough. But in Devon, 4 miles is like the distance from one village or town to another. You know, and 4 is more likely to be the number of people who live in a particular place. So you've got to get away with far less down here. But yet lots of people...
If I may, I've got a wonderful quote here from Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yes.
It is my belief, Watson, founded upon my experience, that the lowest and vilest alleys in London do not present a more dreadful record of sin than does a smiling and beautiful countryside. Look at those lonely houses, each in its own fields, filled for the most part with poor ignorant folk who know little of the law. Think of the deeds of hellish cruelty, the hidden wickedness which may go on year in, year out in such places. So nowadays the lonely houses are probably aren't lived in by poor ignorant folk anymore. They're probably city lawyers' country retreats.
Doesn't that kind of go back as well to what Victoria was talking about in the rules for Golden Age detective fiction as well, and how you can't use the servants? And again, there's this kind of well, why would you use the servants? That was poor ignorant people. They're not even worth mentioning, let alone everything else. It's just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, that was Van Dyne, wasn't it? I'm more familiar with Monsignor Ronald Knox, because when I was inaugurated into the detection club, you have to swear an oath on a skull to keep certain rules. No identical twins, not more than one secret passage.
I think any club where you have to pronounce an oath on a skull before you're allowed to join is a club that's worth belonging to, surely,
definitely.
Isn't it? Talk a little bit about the concept of using past and present crimes, which is kind of what you do in your series, isn't it? Going on to this archaeological angle a little bit further. Can you explain a little more about that?
Well, the very first thing I wrote was a historical novel set in Tudor Liverpool, and I sent it off, and publishers liked it, but it was the time of Brother Cadfael, and they said, we've got so many historical novels. And I'd also, I really enjoyed the Golden Age of Detection and all the, P.D. James, everything. And I wanted to write a contemporary book as well. So I had this brainwave. Why don't I write a contemporary crime novel with a historical mystery going on in the background? And I've always been interested in archaeology, so that's how I brought it in. So yeah, and at the time it was, it's quite original, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So how do you have to go about your research for your writing? We've heard quite a bit today from different people actually speaking about the research that they have to do based on the genre that they're writing in. What sort of research is it necessary for you to do for yours?
Well, look, I start off with I start off with a general idea, then I decide, I make life very difficult for myself because I use a different historical period in each book. I generally immerse myself in that historical period for a while and read up everything I can. And for instance, the book that's out in August, The Stone Chamber, I had an idea about when I visited Norwich and saw Julian of Norwich's cell, and in the Middle Ages, there are anchorites and anchoresses who willingly shut themselves away from the world, a sort of lockdown, permanent. And I wondered, what if one of these people had been sort of coerced into it? You wouldn't see another soul. You were, and they even had a funeral service when they were admitted to this cell, which is often on the side of a parish church. The person was dead to the community, and I get ideas like that. And they're just irresistible. And then I weave it into a present day situation. Like one in The Mechanical Devil, I was reading about a little robot, a real one that was on loan from the Smithsonian Museum in New York, in Washington, to the Victoria and Albert, and it was this small figure, very sinister looking small figure of a monk. and it was an automaton, and it sort of made praying gestures, and it was made by Philip II of Spain to pray for his son. And I thought, oh, that is so amazing, so sinister. I must include that. So the Mechanical Devil was about Neil, or some workmen discovering a little robot from the 16th century.
I do find the,
it's just so.
I do find the whole kind of automaton idea both fascinating and slightly creepy, as you say, actually, in equal measure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, I've come across something in history which, I think I've got to write about that. And then I weave it into a modern day. And there's often either a parallel or a link between the modern day mystery and and Neil's archaeological mystery.
We certainly have a copy of The Mechanical Devil in Crediton Library for those that want to read it. But your struggle, because Kate's books are in and out of the library, as I said to you in an email the other day, all the time. So yes, they still remain very popular. Now, you said the Wesley Peterson novels are obviously your main series, but you do write other things as well, don't you? What other work do you write aside from that series?
Well, I've written 5 books in a series about Joe Plantagenet, D.I. Joe Plantagenet. He operates in a thinly disguised York, and they're slightly spooky books based around the ghost stories of York, of which there are very many. Yeah, so I wrote 5 in that series. I would like to write more, but my publisher is so keen on me to do the Wesley books at the moment. So never say never. I got the idea for those when I went on. My son studied archaeology in York, so he's very good for research. We went, me and my younger son Ollie, we went on one of these ghost walks in York. So that's where I got some of the ideas from. They say your ideas can come from anywhere.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. My main thing I've been working on recently is a trilogy set just after the First World War. It's my first, since the very beginning, it's my first foray into purely historical fiction. And I got the idea from that when I was clearing out, when my dad died, I was clearing out the house and I found some letters from a matron of a military hospital in the First World War. It was to my mum's grandmother, and the matron said, your son is dying, don't hold out much hope. Fortunately, that soldier lived and became my grandfather. But it got me thinking about military hospitals, and then a friend of mine, actually another writer, Cilla Masters, we were chatting, and she mentioned masks that were made for injured servicemen during the First World War, portrait masks. They'd actually copy their faces to hide terrible wounds. And I thought, oh, that sounds brilliant, So then I this idea brewed in my head for a few years, and eventually I decided to write a book called High Mortality of Doves, set just after the First World War in a small Derbyshire village. It's set near where I live, in the loosely based on a place called Hayfield. It's called Wenfield. It's loosely based on round there, and in this small claustrophobic village, and the big house in the village have been used as a military hospital. And the main character is a lady called Flora Winsmore, who's been a nurse in the military hospital. And there are a series of bizarre deaths where a corpse is found with a dove stuffed in their mouth. And in those days, local police forces didn't have their own detectives, so Scotland Yard was called in. So a Scotland Yard detective called D.I. Albert Lincoln, who was injured in the war and has terrible problems of his own, is called up to Wenfield, and that's High Mortality of Doves. Since then, I've written 2 more in the trilogy, Boy Who Lived with the Dead, which is set in a thinly disguised, I don't know whether anyone's heard of Alderley Edge, where all the footballers live, but in those days it was where all the cotton barons live. The Cotton Tots, they were called. So it's woven around that, and Albert's called up again to solve a mystery there. And the third one, he's back in Wenfield. That's called The House of the Hanged Woman, and that's just out in paperback. And that begins when an MP goes missing from the local big house. He's there for a weekend, and he goes missing. And then this corpse is found in near a stone circle, and the corpse's face has been battered, so it's unrecognizable. So of course, the assumption is that it's the missing MP, but is it?
Well, you'll have to read the book to find that out, of course.
Would you like a little taste?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to say, I know you're happy to read from one of this series. So yes, do give us a little from that.
Right. This is Wenfield, High Peak, Derbyshire, March 1921. The man stumbled on, barely aware of his surroundings or his unfamiliar, ill-fitting clothes. His limbs felt uncontrollable, like the spindly legs of a newborn foal. They said the war was over, but they were wrong. Some could put the horrors behind them. They could drink, laugh, and dance as if the world was about to come to an end, but others would never forget. They were doomed, like him, to relive the terrors over and over again, each night in the silence of darkness. For so long, he'd been a dead man, a man with no identity, no history, and no future. Then once the hazy memories began to crawl from the fog of his brain, he gathered what little courage he had left and embarked on the quest for his old life. He'd search for the man he used to be, following the half-remembered shreds of his past that returned in brief, vivid flashes like shell blasts. And when he'd reached Wenfield, all hope had died. As he rose to his feet and dragged his body towards the stones that protruded from the ground like the crooked teeth of some monstrous, long-buried creature, pictures ran through his mind, some clear, others hazy. Recollections of that perfect summer when he'd married his young bride, heat and kisses and sweet wedding flowers. Then the horror of a shell landing in the trench, killing his comrades and emptying his head of memories, leaving him an empty shell, cared for by nurses with kind faces, an unknown soldier without a tomb. His head was spinning, and he hardly felt the jolt of bone against hard earth as he fell to his knees again and nausea rose in his chest. He no longer knew where he was, and his soul seemed to float above him. Or perhaps he no longer had a soul, because it had been made quite clear to him that he didn't exist. He began to crawl towards the largest stone, the one in the centre of the circle. A faint memory told him that the stone was called the Devil, and that it was he who commanded the eternal dance before he dragged the unwary straight down to hell. The Devil loomed over him, bent as though he was playing the fiddle for the helpless dancers, controlling their every move as they writhed in their frozen agony. The nausea eased a little, and he crawled towards a crevice in the wall of rock that towered over the circle. Not far now. He was hardly aware of vomiting. He felt numb, all pain gone, as he edged inside the cave, escaping the Devil before he was drawn into that terrible dance. He was cold now, so cold, but his head was clearer, as though all the confusion of the past couple of years had suddenly vanished. He felt strangely at peace as he lay down and fell asleep, his heartbeat slowing almost to a stop. He didn't hear the stealthy footsteps at the cave's entrance. He didn't feel the rock crashing down into his face once, twice, 3 times, destroying his features, ensuring that he no longer existed. So that's how the House of the Hanged Woman begins.
Excellent. Thank you, Kate. Is this going to remain a trilogy, do you think? Or are you going to add to this?
It was always intended to be a trilogy. But again, as I said about the Joe Plantagenets, never say never. It does have a pretty final ending. But
as you say,
any more than that.
you never know, and we're certainly not going to go into any more detail than that.
Nope.
If anyone's got any questions for Kate, do drop them in the chat at any point, and I will throw them in as well. We were talking at the last panel, Kate, about with Jenny Kane about her writing day, because she also teaches writing to students, and as well as writing her novels, is also a script writer and does various other things. And I was asking her about the difficulties or otherwise of focusing the mind between one project and another in the way that she works. How do you work? How does your writing day compare with that, for example, in how you work?
Yeah, well, I try and have a routine. I think you've got to, really, if you're writing professionally. I start about, always go out for a paper in the morning. I can use the excuse at lunchtime of reading the paper, that it's research. Because I can cut bits out of the paper, interesting snippets and stories. So I go for a little walk in the morning, get a bit of exercise, and then about 10 o'clock, I come into my office and lock myself away, hoping my husband brings me copious amounts of tea and coffee, and get to work. I was interested in Victoria's talk about whether you're a planner or a seat of your pantser.
Yes. Which are you? Do you plot, or do you just go for it?
I start off with the best of intentions. Watching, I make a flow chart. I scribble down ideas, then I make a flow chart with the murder in the middle, then the historical mystery down one side, and all the clues and things that happen. Sometimes they're a little, I don't know whether there are any on this. Little fish, red herrings. But that's only really to focus my mind. I have actually written, I don't know whether any of your readers have come across this book. It's by members of the Detection Club, How Done It. And it's sort of an advice book, really, and how different writers go about writing and publicity, all sorts, everything is in there. It's a wonderful book. And I've written a bit on plotting. As I was about to say, I don't stick to that plot at all. I plot about 3 chapters in advance, and then I keep getting different better ideas. He would have been far better doing that, or why didn't he do that? And so it's an iterative process. It's I'm sort of making it up as I go along. I really envy these writers who can do synopses. I really envy them, because I can't, because it would be completely different. I think I'd feel constrained if I'd gone to the trouble of writing a synopsis. I'd feel constrained to that. I say, I make it up as I go. I have a starting point, and then
deviate.
I deviate, definitely. Yeah. And I do about 5-6 drafts.
Yeah.
I'm about to start on the 4th draft of the book. I'm writing at the moment, so I've made loads of notes. And, so
Yeah, I mean, I know people do vary in this, don't they? And we saw Catherine Cooper in the crime panel this morning was definitely a proponent of the post-it note, and you've just waved a board full of post-it notes at us there as well. I know my wife Tracy, who's just on the other side of the room behind me here, is a great fan. Are you not, of the post-it note as well?
Yes, you can't do without post-it notes.
Yeah,
we do without them.
but Tracy has also said to me before that she's kind of suffered a similar kind of issue that, I mean, you were saying about you're deviating from your plot there, when suddenly I get shouted at and say, well, character A has just killed character B. Why has that happened? That wasn't what I intended. and everything goes off in a completely different direction from there.
Yeah, well, I just get better ideas. So I even change my murderer sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't it? Oh, in fact, I've just changed the murderer. Oh, of course, you know, you get the of course moments.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I've heard those as well. I've just realised that. Yeah, it's definitely a very organic process, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
And I was laughing that Victoria was saying, and I think somebody said this morning as well about having to be very careful about sharing things that you have written down because they have clues and things on them as well. People this morning were referring to Victoria's famous or infamous whiteboard, and I've had to be very careful with my camera today as well, because you can just see the corner of Tracy's whiteboard behiin me here, which I'm not allowed to show because it's her entire novel.
Like me, it would how it ends up.
Yes.
In print.
Yes, there's far too much to be given away if you read the whiteboard. Yes. Louise in the chat has asked a question here. Louise says, "Hi Kate, I've started creative writing and looking to start my first short story. If you had one thing only to share with me, what advice point would that be?"
Oh, for short stories. I don't. Oh, got me flummoxed now.
Doesn't have to be for a short story, but just for writing in general. If you could only give somebody one piece of advice, what piece of advice would you give them?
Write the kind of thing you love reading. Write what you're passionate about, because I couldn't write a romantic novel. You know, so it's always got to be someone murdered in my book.
It's fine to be passionate about crime. There's nothing wrong with that. It's no problem at all. As long as you clear your search history on your web browser regularly, you can be a crime writer.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Write about what, and also read as many things in your chosen genre as you can.
You obviously also read other people's crime novels, but do you have a particular style or a particular author or authors that do inspire you, do you think, or do you just read very broadly around it?
I have my favorite authors I love Reginald Hill, the Dio and Pascoe books, so brilliant. Ruth Rendell, P.D. James, Peter Lovesey, who I love. My friend Martin Edwards, Mark Main Hall was mentioned.
Yes.
I'll probably think of loads more. Christopher Fowler, I love, the Bryant and May.
Yes, again, actually, that kind of goes back to the golden age style, doesn't it, as well? I mean, I know there are, Simon Brett has
I love Simon Brett.
Similar titles in that style as well, with Blotto and Twinks, I suppose. It is still a very, very popular style, isn't it? The kind of 1920s golden age style. I mean, very, very different to a lot of the kind of grittier crime fiction that we get now, certainly. And especially, I suppose, the kind of Nordic, noir novels, which are very popular. It's kind of the antithesis of that, I suppose, in many ways.
I like a few of those. I like Hawk and Nessa. More sort of humorous.
Yes, yeah. There's a question from Vic, who is a great fan of your books, and she asks, I think the Wesley Peterson series would make a fantastic TV series, says Vic. Who would you cast as Wesley and Jerry?
Oh gosh. Well, I used to have Adrian Lester as Wesley, or Chiwetel Ejiofor, and he's probably getting a bit old now, unfortunately. Ricky Tomlinson as Jerry. I always saw him. But yeah.
Would you be happy to see them televised?
Oh, I would, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some people prefer things on the page and don't like them to be adapted, and other people do. And I mean, obviously, Anne Cleeve's Vera series has been very popular, for example.
Yes,
so, yeah, I'm sure plenty of people would very much like to see yours. Maybe Vic would like to drop into the chat who she thinks should be cast as Wesley and Jerry. That would be interesting to know too. So you let us know that, Vic. In the meantime, Linda also asks, hoping to have a holiday in the area and would love to visit locations in your books and also Bernard Knight's locations. Have you thought about doing a guide to places in the novels?
I haven't actually. Of course, Tradmouth is Dartmouth. Derrenham is Ditchson. There are various places. Neston, of course, Totnes. Sometimes Kingsbridge, Dukesbridge is Kingsbridge. I changed the name to protect the innocent, and also to prevent letters in green ink saying there isn't a police headquarters in Dartmouth. I think they've just lost the police. Well, I think it was a police post.
Do you prefer to work with fictionalized locations, but only very, like you've said a couple of times, thinly disguised?
Yeah, I did the same with York. It was even big because I can change things around. Like Tradmouth's got a hospital where Colin Bowman, the pathologist, can do his post-mortems, and of course Dartmouth's lot just lost its cottage hospital, so it's things like that. And I say, I'm sure people get quite annoyed if I used Dartmouth and got it so wrong.
It is a risk, isn't it? I suppose if you're going to use an actual location rather than fictionalizing,
of course,
there will always be people who type only in capitals who will let you know if there is an issue with it.
Of course, Thomas Hardy did it with Casterbridge being Dorchester. Yes.
Yeah, and he did all right for himself, didn't he? Let's be honest.
It's good enough for him, it's good enough for me.
You mentioned earlier on about the fact that you have a new book coming out in August.
Oh, yes.
And I did, when we were promoting this event, allude to the fact that you would read some words that have not yet been published.
Ah, yes.
From your forthcoming book to whet people's appetites and to give a sense of excitement about the fact that they're getting something which other people cannot have just by being here.
I'll just say, give you a quick précis of.
Oh yes, do lead into it. Yeah.
One summer's evening, a retired couple are shot dead at their Devon home in the middle of the countryside. They're originally from London, and he used to be a Met officer, and of course the police suspect that it was something to do with his name's Robert Gerdner. So the police suspect it is something to do with his police career, until his name's found on a list of people who've been sent tickets anonymously for a tour of a very sinister former asylum on Dartmoor. And that's called Darkhole Grange. And then Wesley finds that others on the list have died in mysterious circumstances. And then Neil, Wesley's archaeologist friend, finds a skeleton of a woman buried in a sealed chamber dating back to the 15th century, which is later found to be an anchoress's cell. And is there a link between this ancient cell and Darkhole Grange? So I'll just read you the beginning. And it starts off with events in an escape room where Neil's archaeologist colleagues were booked to go for a stag party. But this happens the day before. This is the reason the stag party is cancelled. The pharaoh's tomb needed tidying. The hen party had had far too much to drink before they'd even set foot in the place, and they left it in a terrible state. Charlie Maddox keyed in the code and pushed the door open. As it swung shut behind him, he heard the lock engage. He'd be trapped in there until he entered the override code, which he knew off by heart. He pressed the switch concealed behind the painted panel on the wall, and a hidden lighting flickered on, casting shadows on the walls decorated with hieroglyphics and images of animal-headed gods. The statues, stationed at each corner, stood tall as a man, with painted eyes and jackal heads, focused on the massive sarcophagus in the centre of the room. The stone finish looked convincing, but the lid was made of fiberglass, light as air and easy for the punters to shift to get at the clues hidden inside. The lid was lying askew, revealing the mummy, its bandages half unwrapped and draped over the side of the tomb like the entrails of some long-dead creature. The hen party had really gone for it. The models arranged round the room had been lovingly copied by an artist's friend from examples in the British Museum, but now they lay scattered, and there was an empty Prosecco bottle balanced on a replica boat, as though it was about to be ferried down the Nile by the wooden oarsman. Charlie secretly enjoyed this time on his own at the end of the day, when he'd sent the others home, and he could gather his thoughts, taking his time before the homeward journey. And since his visit to Darkhill Grange, he'd had a lot to think about. The memory of what he'd seen there made him uncomfortable. But was he really responsible for the sins of his forefathers? He pushed the thought from his mind and made a start. Another group was booked in the following morning, so the clues had to be laid again. His head throbbed as he went round, dropping the litter into a bin bag, silently cursing the giggling hens who'd wreaked so much havoc. Stag and hen parties, he found, were always the worst. As he lifted the mummy from the sarcophagus and began rewrapping the grey bandages around its plastic torso, the thing slipped from his grasp and he clutched the side of the tomb. His head was swimming and he was hit by a wave of nausea, and as the strength left his body, he slumped to the floor, struggling for breath. This wasn't right. He must have eaten something that disagreed with him. That pasty he'd had at lunchtime, perhaps. He fumbled for the phone in the back pocket of his jeans before remembering that there was no signal in the tomb. He needed to get out, but the room around him was turning black. He was vaguely aware of vomiting as he crawled towards the door. At least he thought it was the door. The paintings and cartouches swam in and out of focus until he collapsed at the fiberglass feet of Anubis, the god of the dead. The last thing Charlie Maddox saw was the god's dog face, smiling at yet another triumph.
Excellent, thank you. And that is from the Stone Chamber, which is due out in August.
Yes.
So just a few weeks' time. Vic has come back and said that she's been listening to the interrogation on BBC Sounds by Roy Williams, and she can see Alex Linnepuken as Wesley and Kenneth Cranham as Jerry. So there we go.
Right.
Those
I
are...
always thought it had to be a Scouser as Jerry.
So there we go. Those are Vic's choices for the TV version.
Right.
Producers should take note now if they're listening. Louise asks, you mentioned a play that you'd written at the beginning of this session. Has that been published, or was it just a personal piece of work?
No, it was performed. It won a competition, won a playwriting competition.
And is it still available?
I suppose so, but it's definitely set in Liverpool. Two old ladies clearing out a house. It was done by professional actors. One of the actors was the late Paula Tilbrook, who was in Emmerdale. And yeah, it was done at the Chester Gateway Theatre and the Contact Theatre in Manchester.
You considered writing for the stage
This
again?
is many years ago. I haven't contemplated writing for the stage, no. But never say never.
Do you think that's because you wouldn't enjoy it now you're so used to writing in novel format, or just that you don't even have the time to consider it?
At the moment, I wouldn't have the time to consider it, no, unfortunately.
It is a very different art form as well, though, as a style of writing, I suppose, isn't it? Writing,
yes, oh yes, it is, yeah.
Way, yeah.
But as I say, you know, it taught me such a lot about writing in general.
Mm.
It was like going on a crash course, you know, crash creative writing course almost. It was, because I was having to rewrite it, you know, for the from the directors and actors input. I was having to rewrite it on the hoof, which was such brilliant practice, because you are right. That's another bit of advice I give to aspiring writers. Writing is rewriting. Never be satisfied with what you've written. Always, you know, perfecting, polishing.
Certainly, I think it was Nikki Marmory in the historical fiction panel this morning was saying that she's very much kind of, you know, her agent is trying to rip the manuscript out of her hands, and she's still trying to change bits as it's on the way out. Are you the same?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think my publisher knows me by now. So.
But are you at that stage where you revisit novels which have been published for a long time and go, do you know what, I shouldn't have written that, I should have done it differently? Or are you not that bad?
Possibly, yeah. I try not to read what I've written. Actually, it's funny, once you've written something, it goes straight out of your head. It's funny, I could read now, say, Bone Garden, and I'd remember vaguely what it was about, but I probably might not even remember who the murderer was.
It's interesting, isn't it, how quickly things move on.
Well, I think you're so concentrating so intensely on what you're doing at the moment that you haven't got the headspace to carry all your past work in it.
I struggle to carry the current work in mind sometimes, let alone the past. We will need to wrap this up in just a moment. Before we do, if anybody has any final questions or comments they'd like to make to Kate, please do drop them in the chat window. In the meantime, Kate, you've got The Stone Chamber coming out in August. Where are you going from there? What else is coming up for you?
I'm writing another Wesley at the moment, but I won't tell you the title because my editor always goes and changes them. At the moment, working title is The Serpent's Wife, and I'm going right back to the Romans.
It will remain to be seen whether that title sticks.
Yes, I think it's a good title, but
yeah, you have to do what your editor tells you, though, don't you?
Oh, definitely. She's marvelous. Anyway, my editor, she's really good.
That's due out this year, next year.
This will be due out in August 2022. So a long time, but it's quite a long lead time.
Yes,
after that, I'm not sure.
Well, we shall see. Maybe you'll have the opportunity to revisit
my editor did. Yeah, after that, my editor has suggested a standalone, but possibly.
We shall see.
Yes.
We shall see.
Yes.
Do you think you'd ever write in a genre other than crime now?
I don't think so. No, as I said, I'm a crime person. I really, the thing that really appealed to me in Victoria's talk was talk about Lego crime, Lego Poirot.
That was great.
I must get some for the grandchildren. I must get some for the grandchildren. Lead them astray.
I like the idea of Lego crime scenes. I think
I
there's a lot
know.
of mileage in that for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a great idea. Okay, I think we've reached the end of people's questions in the chat. So if everybody would like to please, oh yeah, Victoria agrees Lego crime scene is a winner. There you go.
Oh, definitely.
Everyone, please do show your appreciation in the chat window for the fantastic Kate Ellis. Thank you so much.
And can I just add that I hopefully I'll be in Devon in September and in doing talks in Barnstable Library and Totnes Library. And please support your libraries, because Devon libraries are wonderful. And I love doing events in Devon libraries.
And we certainly love having you as well. Thank you for that, Kate. And yes, Kate will be down here in person, hopefully, fingers crossed, nothing changes for that, in September. And you will be able to go and see and hear her live in front of your very faces in both Barnstable and Totnes libraries.